Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining across time zones, states, and countries, and tuning into our timely and meaningful conversation with Combatants for Peace as we unpack their on-the-ground work in Israel-Palestine. My name is Abby Kirschbaum, and as of last week, I am the Assistant Director of Educational Resources on J Street's Public Engagement team. Combatants for Peace is a movement of former fighters from both Israel and Palestine who have renounced all forms of violence and who are working together to end the occupation and bring about peace to both peoples. They are the largest binational resistance movement on the ground and have been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize twice. Before we begin and introduce our special guests, Suli and Tuli, I would like to offer a bit of framing and context as to why we are having this conversation in this particular moment. July 1st, 1 week from today, marks the official date in which the latest iteration of the Netanyahu government will be announcing plans to unilaterally annex occupied Palestinian territory in the West Bank. Given the intensity of this moment, it is easy to become preoccupied with statistics, figures, and maps. We tend to overlook the lived experiences of Palestinian residents of the West Bank, whose lives are most immediately threatened by the prospect of annexation. This is why we are here to engage with and learn from Suli and Tuli from Combatants for Peace. This will be an opportunity for us to learn about the work of their organization and their contribution to the larger anti-occupation and anti-annexation movement. So one last thing before I introduce our speakers, we are firstly going to run through a series of moderated questions, after which you should all feel free and welcome to ask whatever questions you might have to Suli and Tuli. You should see a Q&A function on your Zoom dashboard, so just below the little, just at the bottom of your screen, where you can write down your questions, and I will attempt to ask them in the order in which they were received. I'll do my best. And now, without further ado, I would like to start with Suli. So I'll give a little background of who Suli is. Suli Khatib was born and spent his early years in Hizma near Jerusalem. At the age of 14, Suli was sentenced to 15 years in prison and served a term of 10 and a half years, where he spent his time learning about history, Hebrew, English, and about other world conflicts and peace activists, such as Gandhi and Mandela. Suli is the co-founder, former director, and current international relations director of Combatants for Peace. He was nominated for the 2017 and 2018 Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of Combatants. Suli, welcome. Thank you for being here. Can you please share a little bit about yourself and what brought you to the work that you do with Combatants?
Thank you, Abby, and thank you, J Street, for organizing this important panel here. My background, after what you said, so I don't have a lot to say, then I grew up in a Palestinian family that lived around Jerusalem for centuries. And as you said, since I was 14, I participated in the Palestinian struggle for freedom. At the time when I was 14, I was drawn to what we call in our narrative, military resistance or armed struggle or violence, or call it what you wish, in order to protect our homeland. And then I was sent to jail when I was 14 and 5 months. During the time in jail, you mentioned maybe some great inspiring personalities that I was affected by, like Mandela and others. But also I just want to say that for first time for me that I learned nonviolence, I was 15 during a food hunger strike in jail, where Palestinian political prisoners organized hunger strike to improve the daily life conditions in jail. So I've been with other prisoners for many times, and the last hunger strike was for 17 days. That was the longest hunger strike, means no food, just a lot of water and salt. In Arabic, mayo milh. That's very important part of the experience of the Palestinian activists in general, and very important part in my personal also story. Just to say, like, my transformation happened during the jail and after jail, through a long journey. You know, I grew up with the Palestinian narrative fully, and I come from a family that suffered a lot from the occupation, both my family and the land that we belong to. My brothers were in jail also, so we're very directly affected by the conflict. With that said, it need a huge spiritual resources to use especially in jail time, to humanize the other or to humanize the enemy. And I would say this is a long, long journey. Uh, Comes not just by intellectually, reading some books, rather by, like a deep uh, spiritual um, suffering, I would say, even, and enjoying. Uh, how can you open up to the other side narrative while holding your own roots as Palestinian, as indigenous person that feel this project, the occupation is taking your life and your family and your community and the land. So I could understand that people challenged by this generally. This is a part of what I came out of jail is not just committed to nonviolence as a theory of change. Rather, for me, it's like a deeper ideology and believe that firstly, practically, there is no military solution for our conflict. I learned this in jail by also practical experiences, not even from a books. And actually, to connect this with the later on stage with Combatants for Peace and maybe other activist circles, many of my friends, both Palestinians and Israeli alliances, that comes from an army background, and Tuli will share his personal story now, come to the same point that both peoples are here with all kinds of claims. Sometimes it's conflicted, of course, and we belong to the same stones, to the same land, to the same water, to the same trees, and we have a very common shared value. And the best way is really to find the way to bring our peoples together and struggle for liberation for our peoples, which for me it's totally interconnected. And I would say that our struggle in Combatants for Peace that we established in 2005, 2006, was a dream totally and was dangerous also. Maybe we can talk about this later. In the second Tifada, when I would say like it's not a mainstream ideas, neither sides. And to come together from the other side of the conflict, especially from the Palestinian side, as the side that live under the occupation, because we do talk in Combatants for Peace about the power dynamic here, which is important for me to recognize that without victimizing anybody. I really don't, I do recognize the victimhood, the trauma, and tool is more special in like trauma healing. We can speak about that, but I learn a lot that both our peoples are traumatized historically as a group, as an individual, for like intergenerational trauma. And this take a lot of courage and believe higher spirit in a call for the land that's part of it, unfortunately, is like really in a threat of annexation. Uh, but I just wanted to finish here. Yesterday, it's all personal for me because my family live in Area C. Now I speak to you from Ramallah, which is Area A. It's different a bit. I will talk about this later. My family live in Area C, and my family land also, half of it was annexed already, actually, in 2006-7, where during the separation wall around Jerusalem. We'll talk about that also and the connection to this land that has nothing anti-Israel anyway. It's really something in our culture. And yesterday I was in the North Dead Sea, where it's also threat to be annexed. I took with me my mom and my aunt. I just put the picture on Facebook. It's I was there. I just thought to myself, this might be their last time to be there. It's very deep and very personal. I just want to say it's not about the big politics. It's really very personal for me personally, for my family, for many of my friends, for many of the families and people that I know personally and I see daily. Thank you, and give the microphone to Tuli. Thank you.
Thank you, Suli. I think the way that you describe this situation and your background is just really open and honest, and I think it's really offers us just a more personal insight into some of the realities that you're facing, and I really appreciate it, and I know we all do on this call, so thank you. Tuli, now on to you. So just a little bit about Tuli before I hand over the mic officially. Tuli Flint is the general coordinator at Combatants for Peace. As a teenager, Tuli's family moved to a settlement where he worked alongside his Palestinian neighbors to build it. Tuli joined the Golani Brigade, an infantry combat unit, where he became a company medic, eventually becoming a platoon commander in Gaza. His role was equivalent to a 2-star general in the US military, and he served as the mental health officer for over 25,000 soldiers. Following his service, Tuli acquired a bachelor's of social work and a master's in clinical practice, where he started to focus on treating trauma and post-trauma. Tuli is now an accredited EMDR consultant and an accredited couples and family therapist, and trained in somatic experiencing, CBT, biofeedback, and narrative therapy, both for families and individuals. Today, he runs a private practice in Tel Aviv and works in the south of Israel with multiple generations, treating those who have endured traumatic events. Tuli, I would love for you to share with us a bit about your own background and what brought you to the work that you do now. And maybe you can just give a little bit of insight into some of those acronyms that I laid out for the audience. Thank you.
All right. I was listening to you describing me, and I was asking, who is this person? So basically, you know, I was born 1967, which is like the year that the occupation began. You know, it's not so true, because the occupation of Israel in Israel began in 1948, but 1967 is the one that we used to talk about about the occupation. And basically, when you're born to a 19 years old country that was fighting for its survival, one of the first sentences that you hear, and I'm sure that many people heard it, is that Israel is a small country surrounded by enemies, and you need to go to the army in order to protect it. So for me, the army was something that I was looking forward to. When I was 14, my family moved to a settlement, actually established a settlement in the West Bank. I was optimistic at the time, because I told them it was 3 years after the withdrawal from Sinai. And I said to them, listen, guys, you're going to be kicked out in a few years. Why are you going to do this? And I was wrong. They celebrating the 35 years of being there now, or something like that. It was established in 1982. And as a child, I lived through the Yom Kippur War, 1973, understanding again that there is war, and the Arabs want to kill us, and they want to take over the country. And basically, that was the way to think. I knew Palestinians because I met them and I worked with them. And before the separation wall, Palestinians were in Israel and Israelis were in Palestine. Now it's very different. And it was very natural for me to join the army and look for a combat brigade, and to do, you know, the best I can in order to protect my country. In my gap year before the army, I got to know the West Bank, because I was a tourist guide in a field school, taking people around Nablus, Shechem, and going alongside in the Jordan Valley a lot, and up in Palestine. It's a very beautiful country, and I used to take groups of Jewish tourists and to show them our country, actually ignoring the Palestinians over there and ignoring the fact that there are Palestinians there, unless we bought food for them or from them or something like that. 1985, I joined the Golani Brigade. I became a medic. And then after I was asked to, I accepted the invitation to go into officers' school. And up till 1987, most of my army service was deep inside Lebanon, where as a medic, I was working. I saw wounded from both sides. But 1987, when the first Intifada broke, the whole energy was diverted towards the occupied territories, Palestine and Gaza Strip. And, you know, for us, it was a shock, because as a military personnel, as a Jew in the Jewish army, in the IDF, we were quite sure that we are running an enlightened occupation, something that the Palestinians should be thankful for, and that if we will keep on doing that, they will eventually understand, give up their hopes for a land of their own, and they will understand that we rule the country, and they will come and live with us as, I might say, second-degree citizens. I have to say that it was with a conflict with my ethics at the time and with my values, but somehow or another I was able to keep up with that, because basically I was saying we need to fight for our survival. It's an enlightened occupation. And then came the first Intifada. And the first Intifada was sort of an insult. We were insulted because we said, what are you angry about? What's going on? And the first Intifada and then the second Intifada, I became a group commander in Gaza and then in the West Bank. Took part in house demolishing, in fights over, and many things that I thought at the time were the right way to do things. The right way to do things, because only if we are strong enough, the Palestinians understand only power, only if we are strong enough, we will be able to control them. And we wanted to control them. 1992, I left the army, and as I'm sure some of you know, but I'll explain again, as an Israeli officer in the IDF, in the army, basically you run parallel lives, parallel routes of life. On the one hand, I'm a civilian, I got married, we have two children. My older daughter is out of the army already. She was a jump master in the paratroop brigade, and our younger daughter is about to go into the army after a gap year, working with the Bedouin in the Negev. And you have your civilian life, becoming a social worker, clinical social worker. I'm writing my PhD on the spiritual component of recovering from post-trauma. And on the other hand, I go to the army for the reserve duty for in between 60 to 120 days a year. And actually taking part in every military occupation that there was. First as a combat commander, then as a regiment commander, then as the second in command in a brigade. And 2012, I wanted to leave the reserve duty, and I was asked to become the mental health officer of a division. And actually 2014, it was the year that really changed me, the protective gap, the Gaza war, the last Gaza war, where I was treating post-traumatic soldiers inside Palestinian homes, watching the suffering from both sides, made me come out from that war with 3 resolutions. First of all, I said I'm going to refuse wearing uniforms in the occupied territories ever again. It doesn't matter Gaza or the occupied territories, Palestine. I don't want to take part in this and ever again. And I said this to my commanders, and they said, will you still treat soldiers? I said, yes, in my clinic in Tel Aviv, because I don't want people to be post-traumatic. The second resolution was to treat my own post-trauma, because I diagnosed myself by overhearing my younger daughter saying to my wife, is daddy gonna stay that way? And then when I asked her, what is that way? She said, you went to war, very calm, quiet, serene person, and you came back very angry. You don't have any patience to anyone, and you are always on the edge. And the third thing was to look for a movement that would enable me to stop the conflict and try to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict. And I joined Combatants for Peace, that I really thank Suli and the other friends that established the movement 10 years before I joined the movement, or 9 years before I joined the movement. And, for all those acronyms that you mentioned, basically I specialize in trauma and post-trauma, and there are many new scientific cutting-edge methods of treating people that suffer from post-trauma And actually, the spiritual component of working with post-trauma is the latest invention of, reconnecting people to the universe, to God of their understanding, or to the supreme power, to the sublime, and then they can come up with resolution of the conflicts they were in and the traumas. Actually, that's what really did the job for me. And for me, being in Combatants for Peace is a healing process. Meeting with Suli, that actually, when we checked the dates, Suli himself was on my list. I was looking for him. And I'll show you pictures from Jericho and from places that I served as a combat fighter, working for the occupation, and now I serve there as a peace activist, rebuilding caves and buildings and schools that I helped demolishing. So this is Tikkun Olam for me. This is basically getting, healing from my moral injury. Moral injury is when you find yourself doing something that is against your moral values. And basically, the moral values I grew up on was equality, human rights, self-determination, but I was working for the occupation. So for me, being a peace activist is coming to terms with the conflict between those things. So I can talk for hours, but ask Suli.
Thank you, truly. I'll ask some other questions that will get to some of what you just brought up. So just a reminder to the audience to keep writing in the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your Zoom dashboard. And I can feel free to field those questions after we do a couple of moderated ones. So thank you to those who have asked questions. So I think before we jump into some more annexation related questions, I want to stick with personal. So and both of you kind of mentioned it a bit, but maybe first for Suli, because we haven't heard from you in a while, can you just share a little bit with us about the reaction of those closest to you, friends, family, former colleagues, whomever, about the work that you do in Combatants, perhaps in the beginning, and throughout, and even now, positive or negative? Just enlighten us, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, as I said in my talk, sorry, just a second. The idea of coming together from both sides of the conflict, anywhere in the world, even if we get zoom out from the Palestinian-Israeli thing, and we go to Ireland, both European, white, Christian, it's not accepted in any conflict we know of, like in South Africa and Cyprus, in Germany, in Berlin, East and West. So I just want to put that context that generally, the ideas that we led us to where we are now are not mainstream ideas. And any of these big revolutionary ideas, usually it include a few visionary people that would be called crazy, because it doesn't look realistic for many people. As Tuli mentioned, many people, he said, in the Israeli side believe the only way to deal with Palestinian by force, and actually the other way around, just to say. So with that said, maybe two things just to mention. We enjoy, as Combatants for Peace, a little bit of privilege being ex-prisoners or ex-soldiers that give you some kind of credibility in the street credibility to a certain level. With that said, still, of course, there is always, with ups and downs, a criticism and what's called anti-normalization. I would say we are more privileged than a normal dialogue or group that would suffer more from this than Combatants for Peace, because it's not just a dialogue group, which is important to mention. It's an organization that opposes the occupation directly and honestly and publicly. With that said, we got a lot of attacks, we can talk about sometimes in social media, people will call us traitor or normalizers. and Palestinian side. Also on the Israeli side, when we do the Memorial Day, we'll talk about it maybe later, or maybe some of the audience watch it online this year. There was also attacks by many Israelis calling our Israeli colleagues and alliances, you are not Israelis anymore, even though some of them were in a highest rank of the army. So the hopelessness, the no political process that exists right now and the last of years, it does work against us, I have to say. The environment. So people watch settlements growing and settler violence. People see their lands taken and by stolen like day by day, and the checkpoint system and no freedom of movement and the wall and all the list of human rights violation that happened by the system here. Of course, it looks like everything work against us and people will react emotionally and angry. With that said, I'm like typically optimistic with the darkest time of the history. Some people have to see higher and beyond this moment and keep the optimism, because the only revolution I know of is like a full of hope revolution while we see the reality.
Thank you, Sully. Tuli, if you can just address the similar question about the reactions that you've received to your involvement, perhaps if you can shed some light on how your former soldiers or people you worked with in the military reacted to your being part of Combatants.
Joining Combatants for Peace basically is, giving up on being the mainstream officer, lieutenant colonel, having the prestige of being a lieutenant colonel, doing, working. It opens, Israel is a very militaristic state, I'm sorry to say. And, when you come with your rank and you say, I'm a lieutenant colonel, it opens many doors. And joining Combatants for Peace is actually giving up on that advantage that you have. Basically, the Ministry of Defense, who is the largest employer in Israel, does not want to work with me anymore, although I'm an expert in post-trauma. So people need to really fight with them in order to get me to treat them, because they look online and they say there's something weird here. I also have many arguments with my family, because half of my family lives in a settlement, and my uncle does invite me to come, but he says, will you come to the occupied territories? I'm saying, no, I don't want to. And then there's a bar mitzvah or like a celebration, and do you come or do you not come? And when I come over and I say, look, the separation wall closes you off, I crossed the border in order to come over. And they say, oh, you with your stupid things, and they try to overlook this. And actually, you can say that out of my 700 soldiers, as a regiment commander, and many friends from the army, there's a range. Some of them emphasize, some of them join the movement. This is, a few. Most of them say, we don't understand what you're doing. And many of them have defriended me on Facebook, go on talkbacks, call me a traitor, a cheater. How can you do this? We were fighting together. These Palestinians were trying to kill us. How can you be with them? If I post a picture from Bet Omar or from a place that we were there as soldiers, saying something about that, they are very angry with me. And I'm happy to say that some of them call me privately and ask for explanations. And this is an opportunity to explain, to talk to people. I see every meeting as an opportunity to talk to people. We were stopped by a group of soldiers when a bunch of Americans were helping us in a village called Jibel Dib to build the playground. And the soldier who stopped the bus, we were waiting for 2 hours there. Bess remembers the thing. I spoke with the soldiers, explaining them who I am, showing them my ID card and my rank. And 2 of them have joined the movement after that. So it ranges, but most people regard me as a weird leftist, extreme leftist, as a danger to the land of Israel, and as someone who is so naive to think that the Palestinian can live in peace with us that I'm almost childlike. They treat us as we are like naive children. You will grow up and you will understand that you need to be forceful with the Palestinians in order to have try. And I hear it from the other side also. I hear it from my Palestinian friends that are saying Israel understands only power. All the achievements that we got are because we had the first, second, third, knife intifada, all that. Although we have achieved things by nonviolent direct action. And more things have been achieved like that. So I don't consider myself as an extreme leftist. I think that both Suli and me are from the center, but the center is to the left.
Okay, this is a question for both of you. So I will direct it firstly to Suli. So considering that Combatants for Peace is in fact a binational or a joint movement and community, how does your movement reconcile with power imbalances that exist among Israeli and Palestinian membership of your leadership and your wider community?
Wow, thank you, Abigail, for this question. Actually, I think to be like, I would say this, among our challenges interiorly, which is exist, like we are very honest people and we talk about our challenges honesty, definitely in my experience, in my eyes, within Combatants for Peace, and I would say in any joint a group that have a different culture and different power dynamic, the privilege and the power dynamic play a big role in our like daily tasks and everything, in every level you want to think about. With that said, let me say this. Like there are some people, like firstly we do talk a lot about that. We don't hide this under the table, the power dynamic. So which is very helpful for many people to open their eyes. I would say many even activists, more like from the Israeli side, sometimes, you know, like with a good intention, they're just not aware of the power dynamic and the privileges that they have over the Palestinian in this case. And if we talk about the American now, with the Black Lives Matter, we can talk about the white activists now. I have many of my friends reflecting right now, exactly right now, on the power dynamic in the social justice movement. And I think really for the activists in general, this is very important to educate ourselves and to talk about that and to reflect. With that said, I would say to be aware of it is a very, to start. It really make things much easier among some individuals within the activist circles that recognize that. Not everybody recognize that, not everybody is aware of that. And of course, you know, like if we talk about our like circles, you know, Palestinians like in generally like fall into the survival needs, which prevent many Palestinians, I'm talking generally, from following dreams because people are struggling with food and daily life and electricity and movement and permits and all kinds of survival needs. Unfortunately, and this reflects itself within a movement. For example, if we talk about like this demonstration that's happening Saturday, there is no danger for our Israeli activists. There is maybe a little risk, maybe socially, criticism. They could be hit by the army, which happens also over and over. But, you know, like, for example, they can jail a Palestinian person for a few months without trial. That doesn't happen for Israeli, for example. So there are like some situations here. With that said, also, I would say the system is based on this power dynamic. The whole system is set on this power dynamic for generations. So I'm personally a lot in this conversation around power dynamic, and I'm aware of this. With that said, like, it's really, I don't know like a quick solution how to deal with that than being consciously, mentally, spiritually aware, and to talk about it among different groups that coming from different background, because I believe truthfully, like deeply in my heart, the liberation for our peoples from this oppressed system is totally a benefit for both sides, for all sides, because I really don't see, especially with the, now if we think about what's happening in the US, if we connect this, what's happening in the world with the COVID-19 and everything else, I just don't see the current world system order that fits some percentage of people, while others, many others are suffering, and the environment is suffering, and the earth is suffering. And you know, like I don't see this as stable, as sustainable. We have to really slowing down, and this is maybe a good side of the COVID-19, to slow down and like ask ourselves questions, which world we want to live. And this is maybe a big opportunity. I just to connect this maybe with our conversation, I was 2 days ago where I grew up near my village in a valley where I learned to swim, where like a few swimming places, Tuli know my area very well, Wadi Kalt. And you know, when I grew up, the water was very clean there, lots of animals, nature. And now in the top hills, I couldn't see almost a mountain without a bunch of settlers, whatever, even called by Israeli law, illegal settlements, like caravans. And I was asking myself, forget the Palestinian even for a minute. I know many Israelis that care about the environment, actually. They do, like the mainstream Israelis. I'm not talking even about activists. I just like was wondering why don't this majority really like fight for the environment, for the nature, for the water, like forget even if you don't care about the other. So this is really important to say, because Combatants will be a binational movement, which means every position had like Tuli's partners, Jamil from Deshi camp. So of course, if you grew up in Tel Aviv and Deshi camp with a generational trauma and everything, obviously you are not in the same, like knowing a few languages and studying in Harvard. That's not the case for us. But I really want to say that we should be careful also on the other side of the story, not to fall into victimization and racism. And we should also like really take responsibility together. And that's what I believe in Combatants for Peace as a movement, that taking responsibility together.
Thank you. If you feel free to just give a couple of remarks on this, but for the sake of time, I want to make sure that we get to some of our annexation questions.
You know, Suli was giving, it was more on a general level, on a personal level. Whenever I meet with Palestinians from the movement, and I talk with them, and I understand that if they were privileged enough in order to have enough money, enough water, enough food, enough freedom of movement, they could bring so much happiness and so much development into the world, and now they're stuck in the Heyshe or in a refugee camp, in refugee camp. And you know, many of the people that I've met from Palestine, I was thinking if they only had the same opportunities as my kids, as my children, and I find it unbearable to be living in Tel Aviv. I live in Ramat Gan, it's a suburb of Tel Aviv, and my two daughters have all the opportunities. The borders are free. They can go to the sea. They can go wherever they want. We could give them the best education that there is. And I lose sleep at night knowing that 15 kilometers from me, my friends, Palestinians, their kids cannot go to the sea. Their kids cannot go to university. Their kids cannot go even to high school. And it pains me to know that, we're going to demonstrate in the Jordan Valley. I have a long history in the Jordan Valley. I love the desert. I love that area. And in Vered Yericho, the settlement, you have 24 hours, 7 days a week, running water, and approximately 400 liters of water per person a day. In Jericho, a 60,000 people town, you have during the summer only 3 hours of water, 3 days of water a week, 8 hours for a day, and the calculation is 150 liters per person per day. And I cannot live with this. I cannot live with this situation, especially as the army that I used to serve in has demolished water reservoirs in the west, in the Jordan Valley, as for 2 weeks ago, for the Bedouin communities where the region is going to be annexed. So basically the power dynamics are being talked all the time. I'm happy to say that, first of all, I cannot be who I'm not. I'm a white, male, privileged Israeli, Jewish Israeli. So basically, it takes a lot of time to understand the Palestinian point of view. Just like it takes a lot of time to understand, a female's point of view as a male. Just like Simone de Beauvoir said, a man trying to explain war to a woman is like a woman trying to explain pregnancy to a man. It's like, we need to understand that we won't understand. I don't know how it is to grow up in the Haitian, but I understand that, whenever I'm confused, I go back to the basic. The basic is equality, human rights, self-determination for everyone, radical equality for everyone, radical human rights for everyone, radical self-determination for everyone on earth, in the universe. I'm a vegan, so for every being, but, for everyone. And in the movement, there's a change. I think, Suli, you would, for example, this year, I'm happy and proud to say we celebrated the Nakba Day, and it was an amazing event. It was an amazing event to have the Nakba Day, and it was led by the Palestinian side, and we followed through. And it was amazing to be able to give them, to go back, to be a backseat driver, saying to them, we're here to help. If you need us, we'll join in, just like they join in the Memorial Day. So we are learning to become equal.
Thank you, Tuli, for your honesty. It's really nice to hear. So I'm getting a lot of questions from the audience, and mostly pertaining to annexation-related questions. So we're going to kind of shift gears a bit. So if you can both shed light a bit on how you think that this impending July 1st decision, we're not quite sure how it's going to look, but how it will affect.
Can I show you how it's going to look?
Well, yes, actually, please show us. That would be great. So if you can just kind of talk a bit about, maybe try to make it a bit more personal, think about some of the people who whose lives will be most immediately impacted.
I'm sharing now in the screen. Do you see? Basically, this is how the annexation is going to look. Because basically, these are pictures when we'll see them. Yeah. These are pictures of an Israeli truck demolishing a Bedouin village that we, Combatants for Peace, donated the solar panels and the houses for this community 2 days earlier because of a storm that ruined the tents. We donated money and we came over and we donated the solar panels, and the army It's an Israeli truck, and the army came over and demolished it. And this is a part, this is just outside Jericho, just outside, this is Jericho in the background. And basically, you know, this is how the annexation is going to look. The annexation is going to look that, you know, I saw some of the pictures.
Totally. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm seeing some questions. Is it possible to enlarge the images in the...
This image?
Look on them. Just click on the individual images if possible.
Yeah, but don't you see the image now?
You can see them, but maybe if you just click on one at a time, it might be helpful.
Okay. Do you see it now?
It's about the same, but...
Do you see the whole like images, or do you see one image?
We see the whole image bank, so we want to see the...
Oh, sorry. So I'll stop sharing and I'll do something else in a minute. I've been working with Zoom because of the COVID like for ages now. And like, okay, I'll know how I'm going to do it. Do you see it now?
Yes, it looks great. Well.
Okay, so this is, you see the soldiers, the IDF soldiers coming over and demolishing the house, taking those caravans that cost a fortune in order to bring to a very poor community. And this is, and people are asking, you know, I heard people saying it's going, you know, there's a situation on the ground that the grounds are already sort of annexated. How will it change? It changes because all those villages will become illegal. And we know what Israel is doing to illegal people. Basically, these are pictures from the Jordan Valley. These are soldiers, women soldiers, that are stopping a Palestinian shepherd on his way with his herd, and we were there escorting them in the Jordan Valley, because you know that the grazing is scarce, and we want them to take. And on the background, what you see is a settlement that they are allowed to work in those same areas. And you see, this is a settlement, a settler. This is a settler, and is now, he makes sure that the soldiers would ban. This is another tent in the Jordan Valley that is being demolished by this white truck over here. And this is us in Kufr Malik, Jamil Kassas, my partner, the other coordinator, the Palestinian coordinator. We came in order to protest against the annexation of a spring that all the ships of Kufr Malik shepherds are drinking in, and the settlers took over the spring and banned the people from bringing water. And we brought imams, and this is Suli. This is Suli here playing the flute. Suli, Nai? Was it a Nai or another flute? And this is the army against this. This is the gas that was thrown at us when we invited imams and priests and rabbis to pray together for peace in that land. And all we did was a peaceful, non-violent demonstration, and the army came over because the settlers invited them. So this is how the annexation is going to look like, because everybody in the region that they annexate is going to be illegal. And when you are illegal, you have no rights. This is why we fight the annexation. This is, you know, this is not a very rich community. And nevertheless, they take their solar panels that we brought in order for them to have electricity. They don't have any electricity. In order for them to have running water. And basically what we do, you know, Israel is the one and only, this is us again in the prayer. And Israel is the one and only country on the world that the water, the rainwater, belongs to the country. You are not allowed to collect rainwater. And it's a law that was made against Palestinians. So the Bedouin communities in the Jordan Valley and Jericho people, when they collect the water in water wells, the army comes over and destroy those water wells. And every year in a row, we rebuild those water channels and water canals in order to bring water to the ships and to others, and the army comes and destroy them only after they collected the water. So the annexation is going to look very brutal, and there will be hundreds of settlements and settlers. And basically, imagine, where do you live, Abby?
Me? Well, usually in Washington, D.C., but for this Corona experience, I'm in London currently.
Okay, so imagine someone coming over and saying, this is my land and you're illegal now. And this is what's going to happen to 60,000 Palestinians. It's like being, invited. It's the most open and straightforward invitation for war. So that's the annexation. That's why we fight the annexation.
Yeah.
Suli, I was taking your time.
Yeah, power dynamic. We just spoke about it. Okay, so I also want to add, as I said at the beginning, for me it's very personal because my family live in Area C in a town called Hizma, northeast Jerusalem, and my family land, half of it was already annexed in 2006-7 when they built the separation wall around Jerusalem. So we know from real practical life how annexation will look like. We'll talk more about this, but just these pictures, I've been yesterday with my mom and aunt, and you can tell from their dress, from their spiritual, everything, they're totally from the land and connected to the land and to the spirit of this land. This is North Dead Sea. So when we talk about the annexation of third of West Bank, part of it, what left for us is the North Dead Sea, where we can't actually drive along this Dead Sea or go to the Dead Sea except a little part, and this little part will be even taken. So we just went there yesterday because this might be the last time we could see the Dead Sea. So we drove until the checkpoint of the Dead Sea. So this is also to add that for West Bank in general, which people don't have permits under this military regime, you can, like many people, I know many people, they never seen the Mediterranean Sea. And it's really sad and deeply sad and unhealthy for us, growing up in a country, in a homeland, where it's surrounded by the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Dead Sea, and we have no access to any of these, except like really a little bit North Dead Sea, which is also part of the annexation. With that said, I would say my family, as you can see, even their traditional dress is very connected to the Jerusalem mountain. So my family, my ancestors lived between Jerusalem and Amman or Jordan nowadays in this area. So yesterday my aunt was telling me how she used to go before 67, for example, to visit my cousin in Jordan, 1 hour by bus from East Jerusalem, and take food for him, and the food stay warm and hot between Amman and Jerusalem and Amman. So it's like Cinq Sykes-Picot, the two British, French colonialist, white, European men sit on a table, divided the Middle East into million countries without asking the indigenous people of Middle East. This is exactly what it feels to me, to many Palestinians, to the majority. Basically, it's a negotiation between the Israelis and the Israelis, or negotiation in the good scenario between Israelis and the American government about the map. We heard about this mapping committee. It's American-Israeli committee. It's really sad, and what to say. We have no say around it. Of course, as I said, with our experiences, even for the trees and the water resources, Tuli spoke about it. In every almost village that have a water resources, the settlers have been taking it anyway. Even it's not shared with us. You have to pay money now to go there if you are safe even. And in many cases, you even can't go there. It keeps our hearts broken. It's very harsh for people that are really connected to this land, especially for people like my family and many others I know, it's not about being Jewish or Muslim or Christian. We grew up in an Abrahamic family in a multicultural situation, you know, like I just, in a very personal level, you know, I'm struggling for all of us, for both of us, let's say in this case, for Tuli's daughter and for my family's kids to have space, to have freedom, to have safety, and to get to know each other, to get the languages and the narrative both sides, because I don't see exit alone. I never know. I studied a lot of history in jail, and I love history. I don't know that this place have been populated by one group over the history, even by any narrative you want. So my just to say, like, for example, in case of my family, like they got a permit in the olive harvest season in October for to go to the land beyond the wall, and so the trees are dying, like almonds and grapes and other kind of trees, because you can't just eat from the trees. You have also to work them out. I grew up with my grandfather used to go with a donkey. That's how I learned to play the flute when I was a child to this land. So this land, we see it from my family's kitchen. We can't go there. I see it every day when I go to my family. I go to, like, my mom and myself, we look from there. Very sad, because we used to go there early evening. The weather is beautiful and a lot of trees in this area. And now what you see, a bunch of settlers using Judaism to steal other people's land. Basically, a criminal theft of the land using God and Judaism. This is not Judaism what we know. This is not any God of religion. Like, I don't believe in one God. I believe of many gods, but this is really not a moral practice of a few. I'm not generalizing everybody. I know most of the Israelis are just normal people who want to live like most of Palestinian people. But when you see this, for example, people in my village, when they see their land behind the wall, because my village on top of the mountain, so you can see the land, you see your land but enjoyed by a bunch of settlers and the trees. It's very harsh. Even though I grew up in a culture where, like back in the days, people will say, we belong to the land, we don't own the land, but we are in a different era now. I just want to, like, I just posted this picture today in my Facebook, and I just shared like a sentence from a Palestinian song that's very spiritual. Like, I grew up with these songs. That's how I joined the revolution, through the music, that says we are part of the sand and the sand of the land. I'm trying to translate. And the land will not leave. And this is very indigenous, deeply belief. And my aunt, she's 90 years old. She remembers the British occupation until now. And she will say that Turkish occupation came 400 years and they left. So I really feel grounded and optimistic. I don't think Israelis will feel safety or security or recognized or legitimized by annexing and taking more and more land from West Bank. Knowing many of my Israeli friends, I speak Hebrew, I study, I read from both sides. I think this step is just giving more fire to the tense situation already.
Thank you, Suli. So I know we can speak about this for hours, is the truth, but we actually need to wrap up. So I think many of you still have some outstanding questions in the audience. So what we're going to do is just post the contact information from our American Friends of Combatants for Peace, Beth Schumann, in the chat. And that you can also find some upcoming events and online briefings there as well. So please take a look at that. And I just wanted to say thank you all for joining. Obviously, you know, the next week is going to be kind of a week of waiting in some anxious anticipation. But it's really important that we're having these conversations and thinking about the actual people and the lives for whom annexation. Yes.
You know, I looked at the picture, at the questions, and people were asking, what can we do? Guys, political power. Call your congressman, call your congresswoman. Make sure that people know that the annexation is going to happen. Call everybody. Make sure that people know that this crime is going to happen. We feel that we are alone. We feel Palestinians that I meet, not only from the movement, say no one cares for Palestine anymore. Israelis from the west, from the left side, say are desperate, and we feel, desperation comes from combination of helplessness and powerlessness. We in the movement, we don't feel desperation because we act. What we need you to do is to approach your politicians, and make sure that people know this crime is going to happen, that it is a crime to take someone else's land. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I saw those questions. I didn't want to wait. And it's going to be a demonstration on Saturday. We'll post it on Facebook Live. Share it all over.
Thank you, Tuli. Very, very good interruption. Everyone, thank you so much for joining our webinar. Tuli, please, one more thing. Yes.
No, I also want to thank you and to say that our goal, we have to be careful, is not to maintain the status quo because the occupation is there, even if the annexation is not happening, just to keep it in our mind. And we are really struggling together, and we want you to join together hands for changing, for making better world. I believe everybody's in this call really care about the situation here and there. We're all connected. Thank you.
Very true.
We can't do it without you. We can't do it without you guys outside.
Very true. Suli and Tuli, thank you so much. Really, really special to have you here, and Combatants for Peace. Thank you everyone for joining, and have a great morning, evening, afternoon. Bye everyone.
Right.
Bye.
Okay.
Shukran, Abby. Bye.
Bye.